a kwacha is the money of Zambia. One kwacha was equal to $3. To get one kwacha, you had to spend $3 American dollars. But when the price of copper collapsed in the 1960s, 70s, Zambia went through very bad times. You can trace this with your research people. What happened with copper in Zambia, especially for Zambia, because Zambia was very much dependent on copper. The price of cotton collapsed. I remember the year 1972 saw the lowest price of cotton because the synthetic fibers of nylon, etc., had hit the market. That's another problem of raw materials. One of the reasons why the copper price had collapsed was that copper is used quite a lot in electricity, including aircraft. Now, at some stage, the scientists had developed other means of conducting messages, digital, no longer using the copper wires. So during that time, the copper price collapsed. At the same time, for cotton, when the synthetic fibers had hit the market, nylon and all that, the cotton price had collapsed. It was later when people discovered that nylon clothes are not good for the skin that people went back to cotton. That's how cotton again came back. So you can see the vulnerability of remaining quantitative, not going qualitative. You are vulnerable to so many things. Oversupply, new technology, which renders your product useless, irrelevant, very, very risky. But still cotton, this was not only for clothing, but because Africans sometimes are what they call in French, beaucoup dormir, sleeping a lot. They don't know the full use of cotton. Cotton is not only for clothes, like the one I'm putting on. Because the other day we were having an exhibition here in Namalele, and we had our scientists there with a PhD, and she was showing the cotton. Cotton is good for cloth. The cotton seeds are good for cooking oil. Then after you remove the cooking oil, the cotton, the residue, you can make animal feed. So I looked at the doctor. I said, is that all? Yes. I said that, but we make gunpowder from cotton. But gunpowder is not for Africans, it is for... So while the cotton price was collapsing, one of the countries in the world was buying a lot of cotton. Why was it buying a lot of cotton? To make gunpowder from the cotton. As I speak today, The countries which produce gunpowder in the world are very few. All the others buy from those few clever people to come and pack. You buy the powder, you come to pack here, you say, I have got a munitions factory. Even Uganda does it, to buy. But I've been telling these Ugandans, but you should be selling the world gunpowder, not you buying. But the idea of qualitative had not sunk very deeply in people's heads. The expansion of affluence to China, India, and Brazil also saw the recovery and even the soaring of commodity prices. The commodity prices in the 1960s, 70s had collapsed because the rich people were only in Western Europe and the United States. With China trying to get out of poverty, and India and Brazil, the demand for commodities now came up. Because the Chinese were building better houses, instead of staying in straw huts, Indians were building better houses, Brazilians, even the Africans to some extent. So the demand for cement went up. Demand for steel went up. The demand for coffee, Chinese were not drinking coffee. They were drinking tea. Because coffee was too expensive, it was a luxury. But because they became richer, the demand for coffee went up. I remember when I attended the African Union meeting in Addis Ababa, our old man of Ivory Coast was still alive, Museveni. So we were there, we were all very miserable, we were mourning, the coffee prices have come down, Then somebody told him, Museveni, oh, you should go and speak to the one, Chirac, that you will go and speak to Chirac to do something about the coffee price. So I said, what will Chirac do about coffee price? Will he arrest Frenchmen and force them to drink coffee when they have already had enough? This is just the market. This is nothing you can do about it. But when China and India and Brazil started getting out of poverty, then the demand for commodities came up and the prices went up. Copper hit the price of US dollars 9,900 per ton in the year 2010. Coffee, US dollars 4,000 in the year 1994. Cement hit US dollars 56.3 in the year 2014. I don't know whether 53 for what, per ton or what, you should clarify it. When the NRM government came to power 33 years ago, I tried to promote our considerable deposits of iron ore at Usukuru Hills, Moko, etc. I was told clearly by the different investors that there was a glut of steel on the world market, and that therefore there was nobody interested in steel. Nobody was interested in investing in steel because they said there was too much steel on the market. A price of steel that time was as low as US dollars 200 per ton. By 2008, the price of steel had hit US dollars 900 per ton. So it had gone up almost 5 times. Why? Because of the demand in China. I'm quoting all this to show you the danger of the double production of the same product without making qualitative leap of transformation. Quantity into quality. You may labor in vain. It says in the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 15, verse 58 in the Bible, that in quotes, therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. So we need to labor not in vain. Therefore, transformation means a qualitative leap, not just quantitative expansion. Because you remember I'm saying all this because the topic you brought was leadership for transformation. So I had first of all give you my views on what is meant by transformation itself. It is quantity metamorphosing into quality. By 1400 AD, many of the African societies were a bit like the European ones at that time. They were late Iron Age and were 3-class societies. The class of the feudalists, the class of the artisans, and the class of the farmers. By 1400, Europe was a 3-class society, so was Africa. However, by the time of the French Revolution, the European society had metamorphosed into a 4-class society. And the classes were the old feudalists, a new class known as the bourgeoisie, the middle class, a new class known as the proletariat, the working class, and the old residual class of the peasants, the farmers. It is the new classes, the bourgeoisie, the middle class, and the proletariat, the working class, supported by one of the old classes, the peasants, that caused the French Revolution of 1789. Since that time, European society has undergone further transformation with the shrinking of the feudal class and the disappearance of the peasants, of the peasant class. If you go to Europe today and you look for peasants, you are not going to get them. If you advertise on the TV and you say, I'm looking for peasants in Europe, you may not get a single one. They are not there. They have disappeared. Positively, not dying, but they have changed into something else. Today, therefore, Europe is a 2-class society, the middle class and the skilled working class. The middle class contains active entrepreneurial elements, and the working class is skilled workers. It is these 2 elements that have propelled Europe through the 3 industrial revolutions and are now pushing it into the 4th industrial revolution, the one of artificial intelligence. The problem with Africa has been that in the last 600 years, the African society has not metamorphosed. It has not been transformed. On the contrary, in some aspects, the African society has regressed, has gone backwards. How? The African artisan class was wiped out by the colonial imports. Their artisan products were now monopolized and replaced by the colonial products. Plates, spoons, cooking pots, textiles, leather products. All these were now imported instead of using the ones by our artisan class. So the African artisan class disappeared. The feudal class, which was competing for power with the colonialists, was decimated and was replaced with colonial civil servants supported by auxiliaries like court clerks, interpreters, colonial sergeants, etc. The only class that survived was that of the peasants who were put to grow in colonial cash crops, coffee, cotton, tobacco, tea, palm oil, for supplying the colonial industries. With the independence, although a lot of time was lost with military governments engaged in primitive fascism, nevertheless, many of the African governments have correctly identified two crucial stimuli that can catalyze social transformation. These are education and health for all, what is normally called human resource development, and private sector-led growth. The two, education and liberalism in the economy, have the potential to cause social transformation. Especially the importance of the private sector was not clear to many African leaders. Here in Uganda, both Obote and Amin interfered with the private sector with the national announcements of 1970 and Amin's expulsion of the Asians in 1972. You can see the blindness. What Mzee Obote did in 1970 to confiscate the few companies that were here, and Idi Amin to completely expel the Asians who were part of our private sector. Total confusion that they were sacking us. Sacking what? What were they sacking? Somebody is producing sugar for you instead of importing it, and you declare him a problem. The president is there, ministers are there. You can't believe it. Because they do not understand the importance of the private sector. It's in the NRM, our party, that firmly rejected this mistake by returning the properties of the Asians and liberalizing the economy. Because when we came and we analyzed, that's pseudo-nationalism, saying that, I mean, used to call it economic war, that he was indigenizing the economy. But the Indian has got a shop in one place. Uganda is 240,000 square kilometers. Why don't you go and build your own shop somewhere else? Why do you have to take the one of the Indian? So when the NRM came, we had to fight a conceptual battle with these people, say, return the property of the Indians. And when we were struggling to do that, the whole parliament was full of people who were sitting in Indian houses. So I almost developed throat cancer, persuading them that they should leave Indian houses and go and build their own houses. And the Indian houses were just 4,000. Can you imagine 4,000 properties in the whole of Uganda? If you look at Kampala and Entebbe now, you will find maybe 1 million properties of the Africans, which they have built themselves. When I chased them from the Indian houses, from the 4,000, they have built more. Kampala and Entebbe, and they are now one town, built by the Africans, not by foreigners. But that was after I chased them from Indian houses. Because the Indian houses were Ekisirani. Ekisirani is, no, like Swahili. Like Swahili. Oh. Ekisirani is bad luck, something that can cause you problems. But these people thought that Indian houses. So that conceptual confusion is very, very dangerous. Sectors like transport and housing and hotels were liberalized. And when these sectors were liberalized, by removing the role of the state companies, they have performed miracles. We sold government buses. You know, the government was owning buses. So I said, why should the government own buses? Then sell these buses of the government. And hotels, for instance. That act of removing government from the sector of transport and hospitality has stimulated a total of 1,685 private buses. These were the figures of 2015. 10,940 taxis. 1 million borders, you know, pikipikis, and so on. And 3,000 private hotels. We used to have a few hotels run by what they were calling Uganda hotels, a government company. It had a few hotels, you could count them. Crested Crane in Jinja 1, Rock Hotel in Tororo 1, 2, Eragon, the other one in Eragon 3, a miserable one in Soroti 4. You could, there were like 5 or 6 or 10 government, Uganda hotels. So when we removed the government from hotels, now according to these figures, there are 3,000 private hotels, mainly by Ugandans. Because remember, these Ugandans, because you are talking of transformation. These are Ugandans like myself, who is a cattle keeper. I've been keeping cows for the last 7,000 years. But now, because of the government creating a new situation, some of my children, not me, I'm still stuck with cows. But some of my children have now gone from cows to hotels. That is transformation now. They have gone from what I was And what we have been for the last 7,000 years, I've been keeping count, my group has been keeping count for the last 7,000 years. But now, some of them have gone into hotels, some have gone into factories. This is the transformation we should be talking about. The society to change. All these private sector-led efforts employ a total of 2 million Ugandans. I'm talking about the ones, the transport and the hotels. Not the factories, but the transport and the hotel. 2 million Ugandans are working in those companies. The NRM took a pioneer role in defogging this issue, because it is fog, you create fog on issues, fog. What do you call fog in Swahili? Ukungu. Ukungu. Ukungu unatufunika kwenye macho. Education imparts literacy, numeracy, intellectuality, and skills. When you say education, what will education do? Reading, numbers, counting, intellectuality, being intellectual, but also, in some cases, skills. So it is an important transformative agent. Such a product is totally different from the pre-capitalist populations that still dominate Africa. This is where I had a problem with the World Bank. Because the World Bank, we are talking of private sector-led growth, just like that. Then I told them, I said, but my father is not part of the private sector. Until 1989, my late father was part of the pre-capitalist traditional sector, where they didn't care about money so much. You just produce for eating. You produce, you eat. You produce, you eat. So for the World Bank to sit here, private sector, what? Yes, but my father was not part of the private sector. It was only in 1989 when we commercialized the milk, because at that time, Uganda was not producing its own milk for the towns. The milk for the towns was coming as powdered milk from Denmark. They put in water here, water of Lake Victoria, and they stamp it Uganda Dairy Corporation. The dairy there is the water. And yet, my father was a cattle keeper, but he was not linked with the town. He was not selling his milk to the town. This man had been born in 1916. So you can see by 1989, the man was like in his 70s. But he had never been part of the capitalist system. He had never been part of the money system. The money system was there, he was there. They were not linked. It was only when we commercialized the milk, we said you can produce milk to supply Kampala, that my father now became part of in his last years, part of the money economy. So, education, such a product, is totally different from the pre-capitalist populations that still dominate Africa. The pre-capitalist peasants only produce for homestead consumption. They have still not acquired the useful concept of profit. That difference between the cost price and the selling price if I remember my arithmetic of P4, 1956. That concept of profit, many of the villagers don't have that concept. Indeed, Adam Smith wrote that the pre-capitalist man is a jack of all trades and a master of none. He writes as follows on page 1314 in his book, The Source of the Wealth of Nations. It is impossible, he was writing in Old English, which is a bit different from the English of today. It is impossible for Paris very quickly from one kind of work to another kind. You read this quotation, but what he meant is that the man in the village, in the pre-capitalist system, builds his own house. He goes and cuts grass and pours and builds his own house. He brings his own water from the well, together with his children. He gets his own firewood. He grows his own food. There's no specialization and division of labor. That's what Adam Smith was saying here in this quote, which you will see. So he's a jack of all trades and a master of none. Education per se is not enough. If it creates people who only want white-collar jobs with no skills to enable them to produce goods and services, it will only swell the number of the unemployed. They will have abandoned the subsistence farming of their parents without getting a skill in producing a good or service for the market, either as employers or as employees. So education must help us, if it is to be transformative, to have literacy, numeracy, but also skills, either managerial or professional or technical, which can help us either to be wealth creators or employees in the money-making sectors. Apart from education and the liberalization that frees the private sector to be active and innovative, you need other enablers. I previously characterized this as removing the 10 strategic bottlenecks. Creating the enablers is removing those strategic bottlenecks. By addressing the issues of education and health, as well as the issue of the freedom of the private sector in its efforts to create wealth and jobs, we would have removed 2 strategic bottlenecks. The remaining strategic bottlenecks are ideological disorientation, where emphasis is put on identity rather than on interests, leading to sectarianism. I don't have time to go into that, but you know my views on that, and I have already written on that many times. That sectarianism creates a weak state that cannot guarantee security, a sine qua non of private sector growth. Because if you, for instance, like we had here in the 1960s, what Dr. Gonda was telling you, the sectarianism was around 2 points: religion and tribes. At independence, we had 3 political parties. One party for the Catholics, another party for the Protestants, a third party for the Baganda tribe, one of the tribes. And by 1964-5, there was already a crisis. Because all these parties were identity parties, parties based on identity. Now, since all these identities are minorities, the Catholics were a minority in Uganda. the Protestants were a minority. The Baganda were a minority. If you take that line, you could not get enough numbers to support you to run a government, number one. That's why, therefore, they had to have a coalition in 1962.